So ever since the Valve Steam Deck was officially announced, I've covered it quite a bit on my channel up until, I got one in my hands. And I continued to cover it, sharing my experience with it, testing things out, doing some tips and tricks videos, that kind of thing. And I've been having a lot of fun with the device. I have focused quite a bit on emulation. Pretty much any device that you get your hands on that has the possibility of emulating retro games on, we're going to be trying it, right? That's just the nature of it. A lot of people want to play some old school games, emulate, it's free, right? That's a big bonus. And we have focused quite heavily on that as of late, testing things like PlayStation 2, Dreamcast, GameCube, and a few other things with some more videos in the works in the future. But I started noticing some comments that had me wondering what's going on here. I've been seeing comments that may be attributed to just being haters, as you're always going to get that. That's no big deal. But some comments just kind of either seemed misguided or there was some valid criticism or concern behind it. And, I have said, hey, the Valve Steam Deck, it's not perfect, but there's definitely room for improvement, with updates, that kind of thing. But the comments that I've been seeing as of late, and it's not a crazy amount of them, but it's just, people saying things like, Valve, they're going to abandon the Steam Deck or it's already failed. I don't know how you could decipher that it's already failed. I mean, they haven't shipped all the reservations as of yet. From what I understand and I've seen, I don't know 100%, if this is true or not, but from what I've heard, there's been close to 1 million reservations. So who knows for sure how well in the long run this thing is going to do. But ultimately, the Steam Deck is a PC. But with people saying, hey, it's a failure or it's destined to be a failure, why, right? And one of the common things that I've seen people mention has been, well, Valve has a history of abandoning their hardware, their products that they produce. Like, they're just tossed in a landfill. Nobody cares about them. They don't support them, type of thing. And I started wondering, I'm not the biggest Valve, fan in the world, but I have owned a couple Steam products that many of you may be aware of, including the Steam Deck, right? And I was like, man, I know a lot of times people will say things and it may not be true, but it gets said so often that people just believe it to be true. And I was like, let me look into this. How many different products has Valve actually produced and abandoned or just stopped supporting? And you may be surprised because there really hasn't been very many products that Valve actually has made. So I don't know where this is coming from, but let's touch on the items, the products that I've seen mentioned, right? One would be the Steam controller and the Steam Link device. So both of those were released in November of 2015. And if you recall, the Steam controller came out with the Steam machines. We're going to talk about that more in a moment. But the Steam controller is actually a pretty neat thing. Has a lot of fans out there, but then there's also a lot of people who didn't like it. I think it's a very useful controller for certain games. It's a pretty cool one. Has the 2 haptic touchpads, an analog stick, and then face buttons. Just one analog stick. If they ever revisited this controller, it would be awesome if they made a new one with dual analog sticks and the haptic touchpads. I don't know how they would configure that in, a comfortable fashion, but you never know. I mean, obviously the Steam controller, was inspiration for the Steam Deck's control scheme. So maybe they could figure it out and make something happen. But the Steam controller was discontinued in 2019, but it's still supported via Steam and input, for your Steam games out there. Now, Valve was sued because of this controller by the company behind the SCUF controllers due to the back buttons that it has. And this has been an ongoing thing, it appears, and Valve did lose that lawsuit, but it seems like maybe it is still kind of going on with appeals and whatnot, as I've seen it being brought up about some blog posts from before the company behind the SCUF controllers had a patent for these back buttons or whatever, that there was a blog post with an Xbox controller that had back buttons that predated all this. So I've heard the courts opened it up to say, hey, we accept this evidence with appeals, but I'm not 100% where that's at right now. But okay, the Steam controller, it's not necessarily abandoned or unsupported. It's just not sold anymore. And then the Steam Link device was discontinued in 2018, so it was only out for a few years, but ultimately it was just replaced with the Steam Link app, which made it more available to people, right? You could use Steam Link on Android and iOS devices, and even some TVs come with it pre-installed. And one cool thing as well is it could also be used on the Raspberry Pi. Now, the Steam Link device, though it only lasted for a few years, it's still supported, and it works just fine. You could still use it. It's essentially a device with the app on it. And it has continued to receive updates, along with the app, including not too long ago, you got the ability to pair the Amazon Luna controller to it. So the Steam Link, it's a product that Valve made and put out that's no longer sold, but it's still supported and usable. Would you call that being abandoned? I don't know. Now, the next one I want to talk about is one that I see every once in a while, and I kind of find this odd, and that is the HTC Vive. Not the Valve Vive, the HTC Vive. This wasn't made by Valve. It was a partnership with HTC and Valve. Valve, they did help develop the tracking system for the Vive, but that was where it was at, right? It's an HTC produced product. Now, Valve did eventually make their own VR headset, the Index, and after having looked through many best of PC VR headset lists, I see it's highly recommended and regarded and considered one of, if not the best option for VR PC gaming. And the Index is still being sold today. Originally launched in the summer of 2019, keeping up with demand was pretty tough for Valve, especially going into the launch of Half-Life Alyx later on with the surge in popularity of VR gaming at the time. They had some issues with manufacturing because what they said was an excuse wasn't necessarily hey, this pandemic, but it was because all these other tech companies were buying up the components that they needed, and it just kind of made it difficult at the time to meet demand. But that does seem to have subsided a bit, and the Index is readily available to purchase on Steam, and it gets shipped within a few days, delivered to you within a week type of thing. Not abandoned, it's being produced and sold still, So that's only a handful of products beside the new Steam Deck, right? And that's pretty much it. What other products can you think of? Oh, right, the Steam machines. That's one of the big ones people talks about, is Steam machines. What Steam machine did Valve produce? What Steam machine did they make and sell? They didn't. These were third-party PCs. They were not made by Valve. Valve did have an involvement with it, though, obviously, as these PCs were to use Steam OS. Now, when Steam machines first started coming out from companies like Alienware and CyberPower, the Steam OS got heavily criticized as it didn't seem quite ready, and there were performance issues that people were finding when compared to gaming on a Windows PC. Now, for a machine to be called a Steam machine, it would have to meet some minimum specs and be officially approved by Valve. And there really weren't that many available, and the idea did kind of die off. But Valve themselves, they did state after getting called out, because they did get called out for delisting Steam machines off of the Steam store back in 2018, they stated that they were still committed to bettering gaming with Steam OS, and they admitted the Steam machines weren't exactly flying off of shelves, but they were listening and learning from the Steam Machine Initiative. So really, the only part of Steam machines Valve had to do with was the operating system. Yes, we could hold them to that. That could be a big part, and probably one of the biggest parts, of the failure of the Steam machines at the time. But that was software side. It wasn't a product that they produced. Now, Steam OS has gone through several different versions. 1.0 beta was released back in late 2013, and it had a few updates through the beginning of 2015. And then you had Steam OS 2.0 having a preview build come out in the middle of 2015. Now, where does that lead us now? Well, Steam OS 3.0, which is what we have on the Steam Deck, but it was originally going to be a Debian-based distribution, just like the first two versions, but that version of Steam OS 3.0 was canceled and later moved to Arch Linux with the Windows compatibility layer for use on the Steam Deck. which in my opinion was a good move, as going to Arch Linux allowed them to take advantage of the rolling updates that it has available to it. Now, you could still download the older SteamOS beta installation images and make your own Steam machine if you want, but the new SteamOS 3.0 hasn't been released fully to the public yet. Just a recovery image for the Steam Deck. Now, the Steam Deck client has received a few updates to the OS since launch so far, quite a few anyway, adding new features and fixes. And then just in May, we're only barely going into the second week of May, we've had 3 updates released so far. So hopefully as time goes on, SteamOS 3.0 continues to get polished and eventually released to the public for people to make their own new and improved Steam machines, or even their own Steam Decks from other portable PCs. So, I mean, with this being so early in the Steam Deck life cycle, it's like, I don't know how people are jumping to the conclusion because there's this strong focus on emulation videos. I don't know what the point really is, that the Steam Deck is a failure, or it's destined to be a failure, or attributing that to Valve's previous history with hardware, when they really don't have that much history with hardware, especially hardware that has been abandoned, as it's kind of you can argue with a couple of these, as they've only made a few products, and only 2 of them have actually been discontinued, but still supported. Kind of crazy, but yeah, I mean, not a Valve fanboy. I am excited about the Steam Deck. I like what I have, though definitely could use some improvements type of thing. Battery life isn't great for AAA gaming. Emulation, I'm getting quite a few hours with it, so I'm fine with that. It's an interesting device. Definitely excited to see what the future may hold, but yeah, this was just a topic that I wanted to discuss with you guys, see what you guys think. As like I said, I've been getting a few comments here and there that just made me scratch my head a little bit. Some of it understandable, some of it just straight up hating for whatever reason. Yeah, there you go. Let me know what you think. Appreciate you guys. Catch you on the next one. Bye.